Hi, everyone. Uh, for our group presentation, we decided to talk about VMware. And for our topics, for VMware, just an overview of the company. It is headquartered in Palo Alto, California, and has a relatively new CEO, Zane Rowe. Prior to that, it was Pat Gelsinger, who's moved on to Intel. VMware was founded in 1998, and their real big start was the fact that they were the first company to virtualize the x86 processor architecture. So that really was a big gateway. They were the only game in town and kind of started to dominate the virtualization market. Some of their big products are vSphere, which is the kind of big, not database, but big data centers and big sets of computers for organizations. Then you might also have heard of Workspace or Fusion if you do any local virtualization on your machine. VMware Tanzu is a relatively new offering. They're getting into the cloud computing market, and that's actually the area of the company that I work at. Workspace ONE is a business tool to try and aggregate a lot of resources and have a kind of a single sign-on experience. But they have tons of other products in networking and security, among other things. We wanted to talk about VMware specifically in terms of their diversity and inclusion policies. And we were going to cover diversity mentoring, disability inclusion, the gender pay gap, and hiring practices for diversity inclusion, because all of these topics are of growing interest for companies and in the news. And so we thought they would be a really great thing to talk about today. Our first topic is going to be with Mr. Emery.
All right, how you guys doing? So I want to be talking about diversity mentoring as far as how VMware rolls with that particular aspect. So in generality, a stronger mentoring environment equals stronger equity, and equity means equal opportunities for everybody. So nobody is deprived of opportunities, or nobody is like given more opportunities than the next person based on different diverse things in the company about that person. Only 10% of career success is based on on-site performance, and the remaining 90 comes from self-impression and a strong sight of better opportunities. So that really brings out the topic of how bosses treat their employees, or how employees, coworkers treat each other, and how they make each other feel, because only 10% is based on the actual performance on the job. The rest of it is based on self-impression, which can give somebody more motivation to get the job done. And this is all increased through the effective mentoring processes. And cultural competency, it takes any differences among employees. Some companies look at differences of employees as a bad thing, but really it's a good thing, and it takes differences among them and turns it into a more meaningful opportunity to make a positive impact on other employees who have different perspectives than the owners or than their coworkers. And mentoring has been shown through different studies to increase promotion or retention rates for minority men and women by 15 to 38%. And for VMware specifically for this topic, they have pods, or power of difference communities, which are employee groups that enhance and emphasize the company's culture and human differences. So these are meant to strengthen networks for underrepresented groups, giving them more opportunity to grow as leaders in the company. And this includes several different demographics and charts and site-specific locations, branching nationally and internationally. They have locations in China, Japan, Costa Rica, the UK. These various cultures are highly embraced at VMware. This company is strong believers in diversity being a key factor of a company's success. And this leads to authentic leadership. And the big thing about authentic leadership is it's just everybody in the company, being yourself, not treating anybody different based on different aspects, either internally or externally with a person. Just being yourself, and that can build a way bigger trust level between employees, or between an employee and a manager or owner. And VMware employees were asked to complete a survey about how they feel about diversity and inclusion as a priority in the company, and 96% of those people agree that it's a very important part of part of the company. So it shows that, you know, the majority of the company is in agreement of that, and they all feel the same way about it. And finally, I'm going to go talk about a recommendation I had. It was really hard to find. I had to dive in to the website again a couple different times, and I was scrolling down near where it showed all the charts and the different statistics for the company based on gender, ethnicity, race, that kind of thing, and how they were splitting all that up. And underneath it, they said that their charts and other stats don't yet include the non-binary population, and that they're currently working to do a better job of including that, being more inclusive with regards to that particular population. And I kind of saw that as, and I think they do too. It's an open opportunity to expand the inclusive culture that is expected to be shown and portrayed by this particular company, that they that they're showing to follow by. And grade A, gave them an A grade for their mentoring and their inclusiveness policies, because they really do a good job of this. It's just this particular aspect of it, they can still expand and increase more opportunity. But other than this company, VMware, does a very good job of this being inclusive. And yeah.
Thank you, Emery.
Hi guys, I'm Sam. I did disability inclusion, and this is an introduction to it. Disability discrimination is treating an individual with a disability, physical or mental, as a person who is not qualified to complete their job duty to their disability. Disability inclusion is providing people with disabilities an equal opportunity to those who do not have disabilities. This is important for business to have some type of disability inclusion program in place to prevent discrimination towards these individuals through the hiring process and in the workplace once hired. This is about VMware and disability inclusion. VMware has made tremendous improvements in their program for these with disabilities. Inclusion program is focused on hiring people with autism, provides accommodations for people with any disability condition under the law. Rate of employees with disabilities has increased by greater than 60%. Goals of VMware is to receive the Disability IN's Best Places to Work for Disability Inclusion Award. I gave him a grade B. That's my recommendation. I gave him a grade B just because you can always have space to grow, but I mean, they are very good, so that's why I gave him a B grade. By using the concept of deep level diversity, it is important that the company gives their employees the opportunity to express their personal beliefs and attitude through verbal and nonverbal communications. This will help the company recognize where the improvement is needed and will also give everyone a chance to be heard. After expressing their thoughts, the company can focus on their individuals' beliefs and provide their employees with the tools necessary. These tools can include, but are not limited to, education, open discussion, and social interactions, where all the people in the company can interact without the stress of work.
Thank you. So I'm John Schnocky. The next topic I'm going to cover is the gender pay gap. In general, the gender pay gap is just simply the difference in pay between men and women. But there's two different ways to talk about it. You can have the adjusted or the unadjusted gender pay gap. And the unadjusted one is the most naive way you would calculate it. You just simply take all the men in the workforce, you average up their pay. You take all the women in the workforce, you average up their pay and compare them. And when you do that, women on average make 79 cents for every dollar the average man makes. But that's kind of an apples to orange comparison. So what you can do instead is make sure that you're comparing people in the same job with the same amount of experience and the same level of education. So it's apples to apples. That's what you call the adjusted pay gap. But even there, when you adjust for all those factors, the average woman still only makes 95% of what the average man makes. So at VMware, they look at the gender pay gap all the time. They're very focused on reducing or eliminating the gender pay gap in whatever way they can. And when you look at the adjusted pay gap, women are 99% of what their male counterparts do. And if you don't look at just women for the gender pay gap, but also just for other minorities, they actually earn 100% of the white counterparts. So for the adjusted scales, I think that they're doing excellently. Part of this is due to the fact that they're members of the Employers for Pay Equity Consortium. This is a group of companies that have all said that they're dedicated to reducing or eliminating the pay gap. And they share best practices and continue, they share what they are trying to do to eliminate it. So for instance, it's constantly reviewing whether it's a quarterly basis and not just pay, but retention and bonuses and all these other things rather than just salary or starting salary, right? They are constantly reevaluating how they do things for that. But just like the rest of the tech industry, they actually struggle to get women at the high levels of the company. And so this would really apply more to the unadjusted pay gap, right? Because if women in general get paid the same for the same job, but men get all the highest paying jobs, all of a sudden there's still inequity in that workforce. And so part of that, and this is something the whole industry has struggled with for decades, is just that there's not as many women typically in the tech field, and then the attrition is higher at the same time. So VMware helps sponsor and promote the Women Who Code meetups, which is a big thing, especially on the West Coast, but even worldwide. So that's sort of, I'm sure people are familiar with meetups, but it's just kind of a local event where people, professionals can come who are, maybe they're interested in getting into tech. Maybe they're in tech and they're just meeting other people and they're networking. But there's usually a small presentation, and these would be focused on, issues that are most relevant to women in the tech field. I gave VMware a grade A for their work at addressing the pay gap. I would say one of my recommendations is to continue expanding childcare benefits. Now, right, these numbers are changing over the years because men are becoming more involved with raising a family, but it is still disproportionately the women who have to assume the care roles, caring for children, caring for aging parents. And VMware does have some policies in place to help that, but it kind of depends location to location what's available, and there doesn't seem to be one comprehensive policy that they're dedicated to. But in addition, to help increase the number of women staying in the pipeline and even advancing through the pipeline, this comes back to Emery's point about mentoring and how important it is. I think that there needs to be increased mentoring, whether it's inside or outside the chain of command, because sometimes people don't feel comfortable expressing their goal or their career aspirations to their boss or their boss's boss. And it's just helpful to get an outside perspective, and as well as getting mentors and mentees from different genders, because that continues to kind of, one, spread goodwill about the intent to push your careers, but you also get just a different perspective about how you should go about that. And any sort of sharing of information is good. And our last topic is hiring and diversity. Now, hiring kind of covers a whole span of different things. So this one is going to be kind of shotgun, real quick topics, but it covers everything from the job posting itself, screening applicants, how you test them, and conduct those interviews, and then keeping them in the company, and looking at the retention and the promotion process. So about job postings, the exact way you even word your job postings can affect who is going to apply, whether you're using aggressive language or ableist language. And this isn't just to be politically correct or anything like that. It's actually measurable, the number of people from different demographics that will join based on the language that you use. Next, when you screen the applicants, there's been a push for a lot of automated websites and AI systems that are trying to screen applicants, but that is extremely dangerous because humans are the one to train those, and therefore the biases that are already in the system are just being coded into the AI system. Next, the testing and interviews can be very open to bias because of the fact that a lot of the tests used don't actually predict performance. They are usually somewhat coded for a particular demographic or personality type. They show that when you have the same tests given to different groups of people, different demographics will do better, whether it is in front of people or whether it is behind closed doors, right? The same type of constraints. It's just some people, for instance, get nervous, test anxiety. And in tech, there's a big emphasis on what we call whiteboard questions. And they're usually extremely difficult questions that aren't really applicable to the job and disproportionately punish certain types of people. Interviews, you have unstructured interviews, which is sometimes what we get. It was you just walk into a room and you talk with someone for a while. And that is extremely dangerous at times because people may not have the training necessary to make sure that they're asking the appropriate questions or questions that don't directly code for some sort of bias, right? You're not trying to interview your best friend or find someone you share interest with. You really need to be focusing on the job specific details. So VMware specifically addresses each one of these levels. So they're constantly reviewing. They have a separate organization they give all the job postings to, and they comb it for biased language. They make sure that the skills that they're putting on those postings are actually the skills that you need to succeed in the job, not just like, oh, you need a degree because we want everyone to have a degree, or you need 5 years experience just because, right? They want to make sure that they're leaving the door open for anyone to apply and succeed as long as they have the right skills. Then to make sure that they aren't keeping too narrow a focus on who they're hiring. They're, especially for the higher levels, they're making sure that they're not hiring without looking at least one woman or one underrepresented minority. And this is part of their 30 goals for 2030 that they want to really address. I think they wanted like 50% female leadership. I think that might be the goal, but this is one way in which they're trying to address that. And then everyone who is in charge of doing interviews every year is getting annual interview training to make sure they know what and how they can ask certain questions. And then we mentioned this as well before, the neurodiversity inclusion program. This is the program that's targeted at trying to hire people with autism. And my point of putting this here is, again, keeping a really wide gaze as to who you're looking at hiring and not being too narrowly focused. They have other apprenticeship and scholarship programs and university recruiting as well, because they want to make sure they're just getting the best talent from anywhere. Now, I did just give them a B because it was not that hard to come up with at least a few things that they could do to improve. One was that nowhere in any of the literature could I find them using or experimenting with the practice of scrubbing resumes prior to screening. That's like taking all of the information that could indicate where they're from or their gender. If they have a particular name that's really kind of indicates they're from a certain region, those are the sorts of things you scrub out so that you really just look at their skills. Secondly, and to talk about the scrubbing, there's goods and bads. Some people debate about scrubbing resumes for certain contexts, but I will say they should at least experiment with it with certain roles. I think that could improve things. Secondly, I think they need to just do away with whiteboarding questions. This is an industry-wide problem in tech, but a lot of people have found that take-home assignments work just as well. They predict success just as well, because the whiteboarding questions are just, there's an entire other industry about training people for these nonsensical whiteboard tests. But I think the biggest problem for hiring in diversity is really just, again, the pipeline of talent. in that industry-wide shortage. So, I said VMware was doing Women Who Code, but they need to continue that. But one of the things, especially with COVID and the rise of really remote working, that I thought VMware could do is recruiting from non-typical locations, right? There's these huge hubs in San Francisco and Palo Alto and Seattle or New York and Boston, where there's a ton of people traditionally being hired for tech. But now they're looking at, well, if you look at the cost of living in different places and also the availability of good computer science programs or a lot of businesses in the area that do tech, that means there's these big talent pools where it can be cheaper to hire people and you can get a much different demographic rather than kind of these little pockets that aren't representative of the whole country or the whole world. Again, this is an international organization. So I think that's some really low-hanging fruit in the next couple of years that VMware should try and use. And that concludes our presentation. Here we have our references. I'm going to just flip through those real quick so that people can pause if they want to look up any of these on our second page. So thank you very much. And I hope you guys all have a fantastic day.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you.